Welcome back, everyone. So we're now on agenda item number 5, which is the mid-year business plan and operating budget update. And I will turn this to Deputy Director Don Kavir to walk us through this, and Elton here as well. Thank you.
Yep. Good afternoon, Chair Cervantes and members of the board. For the record, I'm Don Kavir, Chief Deputy Director at CalHFA. And I'm joined here at the table by my colleague, Ellen Martin, our Director of Business Development and Stakeholder Relations. And waiting in the wings, I have our Director of Multifamily Programs, Kate Ferguson, and Rebecca Franklin, our Director of Enterprise Risk Management and Compliance. And collectively, my colleagues and I are going to provide the board with a mid-year update on the agency's 22-23 strategic business plan and operating budget, highlighting the major accomplishments to date and our expectations for the remainder of the fiscal year. With such a full board agenda and in the interest of time, we're going to keep our remarks brief and to the most relevant and noteworthy accomplishments in the business plan. But just for the record, your board packages do contain a detailed report that provides a status update on all action items adopted as a part of the agency's strategic plan, in case any of you are wanting to dive into some nitty-gritty detail. So after providing some highlights and updating the board on the status of our core business lines, we would also like to spend some time today talking about what's next for CalHFA in terms of our process and approach to strategic planning. I've mentioned to this board on more than one occasion that this team is a very driven team committed to continuous improvement, and as such, they're always challenging each other to get better and to just improve our ability to evolve our business and to deliver to the citizens of California to the best of our ability in the most efficient way possible. So later in this presentation, I've asked Rebecca Franklin, who's taking over our strategic planning efforts going forward, to give the board a sneak peek into what's next for strategic planning at CalHFA. Next slide, please. Now, this next slide is just a quick refresher for the board of our overarching goals for CalHFA in terms of our strategic plan, and it serves as the cornerstone for that plan. And I'm not going to read it to you verbatim. I'm just going to kind of simply state that with a mission statement that is to invest in diverse communities with financing programs that help more Californians have a place to call home, we use these goals to accomplish that. And CalHFA accomplishes this mission by focusing on these goals to serve low and moderate income citizens of California through a broad range of financial products that we deliver through operational efficiency and through a lens of equity and inclusion. Next slide, please. So now that you've had a chance this morning to hear from all of our distinguished panel speakers about the political and macroeconomic issues that impact the capital markets and the housing market in particular, I'd like to shift the focus to the conversation in terms of what's happening on the ground here at CalHFA. So despite all the volatility and headwinds affecting many aspects of our business, the CalHFA team prides itself in our ability to adapt to the changing environment and take advantage of opportunities to move our business forward and meet the strategic business goals of the organization. Some of the highlights at the mid-year mark for the organization was the full allocation and deployment of $88 million that was appropriated to CalHFA for the Forgivable Equity Builder Loan Program, which served more than 2,000 low-income first-time homebuyers under 80% AMI. This program helped stabilize our loan production this year despite rising interest rates and also during a time period that in the year that is historically a period of slowdown for production. Similarly, we fully committed $100 million of appropriation to the Accessory Dwelling Unit Grant Program, which produced 2,400 new housing units and establishing a proof of concept about how to unlock ADU production in the state of California and seeing new units built for minimal state investment and leveraging private capital. And so we're very proud of what that program's been able to do. On the financing front, the agency preserved $250 million of tax-exempt volume cap using our public-private partnership with Apple. Erwin will probably talk a little bit about this later, but we've also fully deployed that same amount of recycled bonds, which means that we've expanded California's tax-exempt bond pool beyond just the original allocation that the state receives. We also established a new bond indenture to facilitate the financings that Irwin spoke to previously, and to sort of add on to something that Irwin said in response to Board Member White's requests about how much of these bonds we can do. I think, the bond indenture he brings later to the meeting for adoption gives some caps in that, but I just would point out that we will be issuing hundreds of millions of dollars of bonds in the next 18 to 24 months as all of our MIP years of MIP allocation are coming to perm conversion. So this is the 100 million he spoke about is the first allocation that we're going to be issuing bonds. We'll have hundreds of millions of dollars coming on the heels of that over the next couple of years as we finance the permanent financings. Additionally, the team has diversified our investment strategies to take advantage of market opportunities and the current market conditions. So as we spoke about the declines in revenue from the TBA market, we've made some strategic investment decisions to purchase some of our own mortgage-backed securities at very high coupons to take advantage of the excess earnings spread that we can earn on those in the interim to help offset some of the headwinds we've seen in that space. Operationally, we're very proud of receiving recognition as a great place to work, a globally recognized designation that helps us attract and retain staff talent at the organization. Let's see, we finalized and published the agency's Racial Equity Action Plan, and we have begun implementation efforts throughout the organization. Our IT department successfully implemented what we're calling the One Machine solution, which has allowed us to set up all of our employees to have sort of a seamless experience with our technology from home to the office. And so that the initial phase of that just got completed in the first half of the fiscal year, and we expect to have it fully implemented by the end of the fiscal year. We successfully recruited 2 key leadership positions in both fiscal services and multifamily programs. And we've also created the first ever project management office for the agency and hired a manager for that unit, and we'll be building that unit out in the coming months. As we take on more of these sort of special programs, we've saw a real clear need for it. It's also the way that I think we've spoke to the board about building the bench strength in the organization so the directors can be less of the working director that we are now, and I think that's part of the overall evolution for CalHFA going forward. Our NMS counseling program also hit a milestone. We briefed the board numerous times about that program, but I would just mention that we thought it was noteworthy that at the end of December, we had helped more than 50,000 households with their counseling issues, and nearly 80% of those that we helped were under 80% AMI. So it's a good accomplishment. Next slide, please. Another big ticket item is the upgrade that you heard about earlier. We're very proud of that. Specifically, S&P cited the basis for the upgrade being our independence, our ability to successfully manage programs during difficult times, and the strong, extremely strong and experienced management team. Obviously, that feels pretty good, and we're very proud of that. We have a meeting set with Moody's rating agency later next month, and we're hoping that they have a similar view of our operations and the financial creditworthiness of CalHFA, and hopefully we'll garner an upgrade from them as well. Last but not least, I'm just going to mention that the team over the last 9 months has been all hands on deck designing and building the infrastructure for the new California Dream for All shared appreciation loan program. This is a program created by statute during last year's budget process, which tasked CalHFA with implementing a shared appreciation homeownership program. Ellen has briefed the board numerous times on the development throughout the process of that program, and we're happy to report that the program is on schedule and we expect to launch later this month. So kudos to the team. It's been a real cross-divisional labor of, I won't call it labor of love, it's not a labor of love, but we've all worked together very well, and it's accentuated the ability of this team to sort of deliver on very complicated implementations. While we can't predict how Dream for All will ultimately perform in this challenging housing market, I think the team has worked doggedly to design an infrastructure to help our lender partners onboard the product, but more importantly, to create the disclosures and education that's needed to make sure that the home buyers know exactly what they're getting into and they're very clear on it so they can make informed decisions. And with that, I would just say that I just want to thank the team personally for, their professionalism and commitment to being successful at whatever we set our mind to do. So with that, I will turn the presentation over to Ellen to speak about multifamily program update.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, single family.
Thank you. I was going to say, actually, I'm going to talk about single-family loan production activity. If we could have the next slide, please. A little too far. Back one. Thank you. Yeah, that's it. All right. Well, thank you, Don. And again, Ellen Martin, Director of Business Development and Stakeholder Relations. So when we talked about single-family lending volume last year, we discussed how the challenging lending environment that was marked by low housing inventory and rising interest rates really resulted in significant reductions in loan volume and substantial mid-year revisions to our estimated loan volume. So you can see from this slide that our lending goal for this year reflects those ongoing calibrations, and as shown, we are on target to hit our single-family first mortgage lending volume goal of $2.1 billion. This is, of course, substantially lower, as you kind of heard from Jed earlier, than our 19-20 peak of $4.1 billion in single-family lending volume, but it remains reflective of those continued major constraints in the home buying market, including low inventory, rising interest rates, and falling home prices, which are all really leading to low consumer confidence and stagnated home buying activity. Next slide, please. So even with all those headwinds, we are on track to assist nearly 5,800 first-time home buyers in California. Next slide, please. So this chart reflects the volume of down payment assistance provided through mid-year and our projections for the remainder of the year. From this chart, you can see that what's really underpinning our single-family lending volume is the better-than-expected performance of our Forgivable Equity Builder loan program, which more than offset big declines in our ZIP program, and those declines were attributable entirely to the interest rate volatility that we've heard so much about today. So originally, we had projected just over $18 million in forgivable lending volume, but as Don mentioned, we will deploy all available forgivable funds this fiscal year. So it's clear to us that this forgivable product was very well received. It is difficult from our standpoint to ascertain how much of the forgivable volume replaced volume that we would have otherwise seen as part of our flagship My Home program. But kind of thinking beyond just those production goals, we do think that it's important to note that the forgivable product really amplified our social equity goals, namely by driving wealth accumulation for our lower income borrowers. And so we expect the forthcoming Dream for All program to offer similar benefits in terms of volume, production, access to home ownership, and supporting wealth accumulation for our borrowers. Next slide, please. So based on the single-family lending activity, we have generated $19.6 million in net revenues derived from selling our first mortgages on the secondary market and from subordinate lending fees. Our revised projection is for $28.5 million in net revenue for the fiscal year. And again, as you heard earlier from some of our speakers, these revised projections really reflect the pricing volatility in the MBS market, namely reductions in spec pay-ups. So spec pay-ups are that premium that investors are willing to pay for loan quality and low prepayment speed, but with higher coupon rates, investors are anticipating higher levels of prepayment, and the premium that they're willing to pay is reduced. So we're seeing that revenue decline slightly. But again, our subordinate lending fees do help to partially offset this reduction in net revenue, bolstered again by the solid performance of Forgivable and the ADU program. Next slide, please. So this next chart reflects where our lending products are used the most. Nearly 70% of our activity for first-time home buyers, so that's the My Home program, the Forgivable program, and our ZIP program, is generated from these 10 counties. This is in many ways indicative of housing affordability in these locations that currently have housing at price points that are attainable for our low and moderate income homebuyers. We are hopeful that Dream for All, with its higher down payment assistance, will help us to make inroads in some of those higher cost areas like the Bay Area and Los Angeles, where home buying activity for our population is substantially lower because home prices so outstrip income levels. Next slide. So this next chart is, I think, really telling. It looks at the same data, but it adds in the ADU program to our first-time homebuyer lending products. So ADU economics being what they are, as well as land use policy and land use characteristics, drove a lot of demand for the grant program to LA and the Bay Area, those exact areas that we are challenged to access with our traditional down payment assistance programs. And so you can see that volume reflected in the slide, where now LA takes the top spot with 17% of households that are benefiting from our programs coming from LA County. And then we also see Alameda and San Diego enter the top 10 counties that are beneficiaries of our lending products. Next slide, please. So this slide reflects the racial and ethnic demographics of the home buyers we serve. As you can see, our programs are reaching a broad spectrum of home buyers and are effectively serving historically underserved groups. And with that, I will hand things over to Kate Ferguson, Director of Multifamily, to offer an overview of our multifamily programs.
Thank you, Ellen. Is this on? Yes, okay. Again, Kate Ferguson, Director of Multifamily Programs. Good afternoon, everybody. Happy to be here today. I am here to give you an update on CalHFA's multifamily lending volume as of 12/31/22, and the mid-year, which is our mid-year point, and our projections for the end of the year. So at the mid-year point, CalHFA's multifamily lending volume was $1.26 billion. This is 94% of the goal that we set last year. Production is inclusive of $890 million in conduit issuances, which have closed, $242 million in permanent loan conversions and fundings, and $378 million in new permanent loan commitments. In the first half of the fiscal year, conduit issuances were 104% of goal, and permanent loan commitments, which were 95% of goal. These two had the largest impact on our volume in the first 6 months. The source of this increase in volume was largely related to the delay of projects which were scheduled to close in our fiscal year 21-22, but which were pushed into the first half of this year due to construction closing and completion delays. We've talked about this a lot at this level. Those are largely the result of supply chain disruptions, increases in labor and material costs, and interest rate increases have made a major impact on balancing budgets, shall we say. Based on expected timing of activity through the fiscal year end, staff have increased our fiscal year end lending projections by 45%, or just over $600 million. From our original goal of $1.343 billion to $1.944 billion. We expect to issue over $1.3 billion in conduit bonds for projects in our pipeline by fiscal year end, and many of these issuances will then convert to permanent loans in CalHFA's permanent loan portfolio once the project construction is completed and occupancy is stabilized in 24 to 36 months. Next slide. Okay. This slide represents the trajectory of our growth in the multifamily business line over the past 10 fiscal years. The slide's an effective visual which shows the growth in our lending overall and the component parts of those activities. As you can see, the growth of overall lending is identified by the yellow dots, which are scattered, and have trended sharply upwards since 2018-19. Additionally, our conduit business has continued to grow as a large proportionate share of our overall business. And we anticipate that in the next 2 fiscal years, we'll see a leveling off of this kind of growth. I think we heard a lot this morning from different speakers about the impacts to the market of the interest rate hikes, and the growth we're seeing this year is largely related to delays of projects from last year. So we expect everything to sort of level off and growth to be flat in the coming 2 fiscal years. However, given the continued deployment of our bond recycling program and a potential preservation lending program launch, along with the ongoing competitive environment at SIDLAC, we anticipate that growth will slow but will remain stable. We'll continue the successful strategy of growing our permanent lending activity by structuring our subsidy programs to be paired with both our conduit and our permanent loan programs, as we have done with the MIP program. Next slide, please. So when considering our revenue production at mid-year, 12/31/22, multifamily lending generated $3.7 million, or 65% of our annual revenue goal in the first 6 months of the fiscal year. Revenue projections for fiscal year end are expected to be $8.2 million, or 146% of the original business plan goal. This, again, is related to the increased volume in permanent loan conversion and MIP conversions that have rolled into this fiscal year. These project conversions were pushed due to construction closing delays, as previously discussed. The MIP revenue in 22-23 is also higher, partially driven by CalHFA's decision in the fall of 2022 to increase the availability of our MIP allocations. We came to the board in the fall with a summary of our supplemental MIP allocations, which totaled $21.4 million, on top of the $65 million in MIP subsidy that we had originally planned to deploy this year. This resulted in increased expectations for MIP commitment fee revenue overall. Next slide, please. Now, and perhaps most importantly, we should talk about production in terms of new units under construction. This slide reflects our production goal for 22-23, which is 5,098 units. As we've discussed previously, we count new unit production when CalHFA's firm commitment is signed as part of the construction loan closing. Additionally, for those projects which are part of several multifamily programs, such as MIP, our permanent program, and our conduit program, we count the units according to the hierarchy that's shown at the bottom of this slide. That's why when you see permanent or conduit growth, which is driven by the MIP program, the unit count will show up only in the MIP numbers to avoid double counting. In the first 6 months of this fiscal year, a total of 2,544 new units went into production. Our fiscal year-end projections reflect a total of 4,217 units, which is 83% of our original production goal. It's largely the result of the fact that we are seeing smaller projects from a unit count up to 30% fewer units in the projects that we are seeing come through now. We based our projections for the year based on last year's conduit business. This year, we're seeing anywhere really from 12% to 30% fewer units, and we believe that's largely based on the cost factors as well. Next slide, please. So this, as you all know, there can be multiple regulatory agreements placed on any affordable project. This slide reflects the AMI distribution of those projects which are regulated primarily by CalHFA. Remember that for standalone conduit business, which makes up the bulk of our production and revenue stream, CalHFA only provides a regulatory agreement which addresses the limited bond requirements on 20 to 40% of the units. The MIP deals are the projects which make up the bulk of the regulated unit growth. 79% of our total 2,814 at year-end were MIP units. That is why the total affordable units produced, which I just showed you at 4,217, differs from the number of units for which CalHFA provides the primary regulatory agreement. So this chart shows us that of those 2,814 units, which are primarily regulated by CalHFA, 15% are at 30% AMI, 23% are at 50% AMI, 26% are at 60% AMI, 12 are at 70, 8 are at 80, and 16%, or 458 units, are at 120% AMI. And these are largely conduit-only deals, which are 80/20 deals. Overall, 38% of CalHFA regulated units are at or below 50% AMI, and 64% of CalHFA regulated units are at or below 60% AMI. Next slide, please. This final slide shows the geographic distribution of CalHFA's financing activities so far in fiscal year 22-23. You'll see that 31% of total production has been in Los Angeles County with 11 projects. Another 14 or 5 projects are in San Diego County, where we've developed a very strong relationship with San Diego on our bond recycling program. And San Diego, and 4 new deals have come through in Sonoma County. Production in Alameda, Orange, Sacramento, San Bernardino, and Santa Clara counties has totaled 2 projects each, and production in Contra Costa, Fresno, Kings, Placer, and San Luis Obispo counties have each totaled 1 new project financed in the first half of the fiscal year. Remember, this is aggregate production for all programs related to the first half of this fiscal year. We're pleased that we continue to cover a broad geographic portion of the state, and we will continue to strive to meet the households throughout the state, the needs of the households throughout the state. And with that, I'll turn this over to Rebecca Franklin.
Thank you, Kate. Good afternoon. Early on in my career, a mentor once shared with me the path forward was paved by the giants that came before you. And so when we talk about the evolution of our strategic and business planning processes, I do want to take a moment to recognize the giants that have come before us, because some of the people are in this room today. A lot of them are. So I'm very excited to kind of talk about how we're going to evolve the strategic and business planning processes for CalHFA. Over the years, there's been a lot of work in kind of creating a business planning model. That model was annual, and that we would be refreshing those goals and objectives. That helped CalHFA maintain its flexibility and agility in these ever-changing markets and environments to be able to meet those goals that we put forth, our production goals, all of those kind of things we've been talking about in this presentation prior. This summer, Ms. Johnson Hall challenged her executive team, her cabinet, to say, stop being reactive. You got to be proactive. We got to know where we're going. We got to set some goals, and we got to get there. So taking that challenge to heart, the team here at CalHFA decided to separate the business plan and the strategic plan. That allows us to be proactive and purposeful and unite our teams and all of our work under these goals. And these goals will be for 3 years. So that helps us get a longer view and by setting these goals. So the goal itself under the vision and mission is kind of that long-term thing. What do we want to achieve? Where do we want to be? Who do we want to be? That goal, whether we've met that goal or not, will be defined by a measure of success. And when we come back in May, we're going to give a lot more information kind of on those measures. But today, for this purpose, we're going to talk about the goals themselves. So we're going to define the measures of success, and this 3-year outlook will have an effect on how we communicate to the board our progress and success, because not only are we going to be measuring production, volume, revenue, we're going to be measuring our operational goals as well. We want to give the board a snapshot, an outlook, and to say, this is how we want to, not only what we want to achieve, but how we want to operate, how we want to show up, and how do we want to meet those market demands. So by expanding the strategic goals and what we're measuring, it gives the board an insight into all the other efforts that we're doing to make sure those production numbers either are met or even succeeded at some points in time. So we've set a goal, where we want to go, who do we want to be, but we need to know how we're going to get there. So we break that down into multiple objectives. So there will be multiple objectives outlined for the board of how we're going to get and achieve that goal. We have to diversify our strategies, right? You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. So we will be outlining different objectives. Those are still kind of high-level categories of activities. Again, those will maintain for 3 years. So we're looking at the 2026 year. Once we've kind of defined our goal, kind of a general method of how we're going to get there, we move into an annual plan. CalHFA, I think, is amazing in that our flexibility and agility of how we deliver our operations, our products, our services. We get thrown at a lot of different things, a lot of different projects, and we always are able to get it done. So that's why it is important to maintain that. That is maintained through an annual business plan, and that is refreshed every year. And those are initiatives that will be attached to each objective. So you have one goal, multiple objectives to get to that goal, and multiple initiatives for each objective. The initiatives will be year over year. So sometimes we don't know how we're going to get there, but we need to do some research. We need to do some digging. We need to create a baseline. Those initiatives set annually will help us kind of uncover that. Or maybe it's just a very, very long, arduous project. We like those here. We like to achieve those big, hairy, audacious goals. So, it may take us a few years to deploy. So again, we want to be proactive and forward-thinking. That allows the 3-year plan, that goal, those objectives, and then moving into that annual plan, a business plan, which we would refresh annually. So how does this play out in a real-world sense? If we go to the next slide. So I've set a strategic goal for myself. I would like to become CalHFA's top chef. It's a hard goal, but, we're all motivated by food at the end of the day, right? So I'm going to want to be California. Well, California's, that's a big goal, but CalHFA's top chef. So I don't want to be the top baker, and I don't want to be the top bartender, even though that might help me achieve the chef title. I want to be the chef. And so I have to master all different types of cooking. I have to do entrees, appetizers, baking, etc. So for the purpose of this example, I'm going to, for my strategic objective, I'm going to look at my excellence in dessert making. So in order to be a top chef, I'm going to focus on that. So my first initiative is really to create a baseline. I'm not super detail-oriented in my cooking abilities. I tend to read the instructions once and then go from memory, which always is not good for baking. But at CalHFA, Claire and Erwin have both separately stated that they make the best lemon bars. So as to create a baseline of my baking, dessert making abilities, I'm going to go for the gold.
Can we be the judges when you
Someone said I should have brought the lemon bars in.
I know exactly. Where are they?
But so, I'm an overachiever, as we all can tell by now. So I'm going to challenge Erwin and Claire to a lemon bar off, and we're going to assess my dessert making skills. A lot can come out of that assessment. Maybe me reading the directions once and, going from memory doesn't provide a good lemon bar experience for the audience. Maybe I, am too impatient and I ate all of them or stressed out and then I didn't have any lemon bars. So I'm going to be able to understand what I need to work on this year and then the following years in order to achieve my excellence in dessert making. So for that example, my goal, and then I, kind of have that objective, and then I do different initiatives every year to get to that goal. And yes, we will bring in lemon bars one day. I probably will not make them because I'm actually a horrible baker. So if we go to the next slide. So what are these goals that we talked about, that I keep talking about? So we did do, CalHFA obviously starts our business planning in the very first part of the calendar year. So we as an executive team have met several times. Ms. Johnson Hall gave us a wonderful kind of inspiration to go from. And so as a team, we've created 4 strategic goals. Like I said before, we're trying to expand beyond just reporting to the board the production numbers. We do accomplishments, but really giving measures. What gets measured matters, right? So we want to be able to measure our successes in all facets of our business. So the first goal is lending impact. This is where we would see the traditional kind of reporting like we've seen this afternoon about our production numbers, our revenue numbers, how we're doing. In order, and as this morning showed us, in order to maintain those numbers, we are going to have to be a little bit innovative and creative in our current program lines in order to continue to help Californians find a place to call home. So we want to make sure that we are looking at that goal, and that goal is very important to us, number 1 on the docket. Number 2 is financial sustainability. As we also talked about this morning, and as Mr. Kavir had alluded, we have the opportunity to look at different ways of doing business, looking blowing up the box a little bit. Let's get creative. We do have a balance sheet and an opportunity to help more Californians, but also in maybe non-traditional ways that we've seen in the past. So that financial sustainability helps us. We want to make sure that we're always here to help California homeowners. We always want to be a part of the conversation. We always want to be making an impact. So we have to make sure that we are sustainable now and in the future. The third goal is trusted advisor. So we really want to talk about, we need to set that baseline. We need to understand what are our communities in California, what do they need, and we want to be an authority on that subject matter. We want to be here in the conversations about housing, about how we're helping the affordable housing crisis in the state. And so this goal is really talking about reflection outward, inward, and then being that source of knowledge, engaging with academic communities, other advocacy groups, and understanding where the need is and how we can be part of the solution. Lastly is operational excellence. As reflected in our operating budget every year, CalHFA really does try to be as lean and efficient and good steward of funds as we can as we deliver all of these products and services to the state. So we are always going to continue. I think everyone's worked with Mr. Kavir long enough. You know, good enough is not good enough. We need to continue to strive higher and better and better and higher. So we are going for operational excellence. We need the right people here. We need the right work environments. That's seen through some of the accomplishments we have, the Great Place Work certification, but we want to do better. We want to do more. We want our employees to be engaged and happy. We want a diverse, inclusive work environment, and we want to be efficient in our processes and leveraging technology appropriately. So that fourth goal is kind of speaking to that last goal. Our last slide kind of is just an overview of our operating budget. I'm going to save anything. We do have the budget report in the board packet, so I'm going to close out with thanking the board and ask if there's any questions.
Thank you all very much. That was a great overview. And I'd like to pass this to the board to see if there are any comments or questions on the presentation.
I'd like to just say congratulations on just this presentation. I think it provides clear oversight of where we are. There are a lot of highlights, but in the midst of it all, to have a place where people come every day and enjoy their work, are committed to their work, committed to excellence at every level, is quite an achievement. So to Tina and the whole staff here, I say congratulations on efforts that are quite notable.
Yeah. Other, yes, Member Russell.
I actually have a list. No, that's marvelous stuff here, and I guess I first want to just congratulate Ms. Johnson Hall on really assembling a team that is nimble, that you are creative, and that really you are forced so many times to respond to either overly vague or sometimes all too narrow guidance from the legislature with programs that you are handed. And this is a team of creativity. I just really appreciate the level of intellect, of heart, of commitment that I see here. So that is an umbrella over all of this, I think. And let's give, yes, thank you. I also want to thank Ms. Ferguson for developing the relationship with the San Diego Housing Commission. I know that was a troubled relationship, and it is humming along right now from what I hear. Very, very difficult. And so we're so happy that we have arrived on the other side of the storm with that. A couple of questions, I think. Smaller unit counts. If we're achieving smaller unit counts on these sites, are we... There's a concern in a lot of areas that we are underperforming. In LA, for instance, with HHH, because the sites were limited for financial reasons, that we've underdeveloped many urban sites, and that's really one of the bigger concerns. Who's getting that one?
I'll give it to the one that brought it up.
Okay. Well, no, because that seems like that's a loss. I mean, because we are losing potential for this land development. And are there ways that we can help?
You know, I have to be honest, we have to do more research on it because it feels like it's a bit of an anomaly. I think last year people were, certainly the deals that we saw come through, being smaller, up to 30% smaller. I have to think that part of that was driven by cost. But that doesn't explain it all. So we need to do more research and understand it. Because I agree with you, there is a concern there. We want every dollar to be used as efficiently, from my perspective, as possible. And so that's maximizing units per dollar, not having this reduction. We really saw the reduction in our conduit business, which is broad and covers most of the state. So we will continue to look at that, and I would be happy to report back on that, because I share your concern that it points to an inefficiency in the market right now, which we're not pleased with. It's not something we drive, but certainly something we try to influence.
Yeah, well, and I approach it from a planning standpoint, that once you build something on a site that's new, it's 50 to 150 years before it changes its use. And if
Exactly.
we consistently underbuild our land, we are never going to achieve our climate goals.
Yeah, it feels like an anomaly because it was just 1 year. So we'll do more research.
Thank you.
So I just want to jump in on that one, because it also struck me as a really important issue. And so it's, because you're also talking about density, you also then brought up like the cost per unit or of investment, and is there a scale that's being lost? I think there's all kinds of measurements within there that tell different stories, so I think that'd be great to cut into that, to delve into that one. So, yeah.
we definitely plan on doing that.
So I just wanted to piggyback. I totally agree. Thank you.
Thank you. Two more quick notes here. One is, as mentioned, the push into preservation space, and I've heard that phrase a couple of times. And we recognize the challenge, especially with 4% being so competitive, that acquisition rehab has almost disappeared, it seems like, in our market in San Diego. But what are other things we could be doing, and is it proposing legislation? Is there a framework that we need to make preservation more, to make it easier to be more successful in preservation of existing NOAA in particular? Because
Yeah, I think part of the problem in preservation, from my perspective, and we talked about this just the other day with some stakeholders, is that it means so many different things to so many different people. Preservation can be everything from converting a naturally occurring affordable housing project to a regulated unit, to really preserving units physically that have capital needs where tenants are not being served appropriately in their physical environment, and also to preservation of, from a regulatory perspective, and I know that HCD has been very active in this, making sure that expiring use projects are preserved. So it means a lot of different things, and I think Tina has certainly, I'm sorry, Director Johnson Hall has certainly pushed us to try and put some sort of preservation strategy together, which we are working on right now. But it's not easily identifiable, sort of which is the greatest need or where we can be most efficient, which is really what we're going to try to do. Make sure that we can go into a space that makes the most sense and where we can be most efficient and use our resources in the best way possible.
Thank you. And just to underscore, we've recently had a discussion in San Diego with the Land Use and Housing Committee about preservation, that NOAA, in the year 2000, we had 90,000 units affordable at 50%, naturally affordable at 50% AMI and below. By 10 years later, we had 60,000 such units. This year, we have 30,000 such units in the county. So that's 2/3 of the housing affordable, naturally affordable to lower-income families has been lost. And so we recognize that per unit, it can actually be more effective to preserve. We have to do both, clearly, and unfortunately, we seem to be making scarcity choices, not abundance choices these days. So I understanding the numbers better will help us make those decisions moving forward, and I appreciate
Agree.
the thought you bring to that. And then last, I just want to say, because this is overarching, is the strategic goals, how are these tied into the state's climate action goals? Because really, and that's, I don't know if you can answer the question or if it's just a question you want to say yes, I think it's one of the most important things we can talk about, is we're making large investments. By the guidelines that we promulgate, we are directly influencing the marketplace, and are we using our heft, our market weight, to effectively promote smart growth, climate-friendly policies, and how are those woven into the work that we do?
I'll start. So we're still obviously crafting the plans themselves. So I think that's a good item for the team to take back. I do think that in goal 1 and 2, looking at how we're currently doing business, I think that's a conversation that we continue to have in the multifamily space, ESG principles, and understanding that, and making sure when we're looking at deals in the multifamily space that is a conversation that we've been having, I think now, and we will continue to have that. I think in goal 2, though, when we look at, these innovative new sources of revenue and ways to grow and expand the business, that is something that Erwin and his team, I think, do take very seriously when they're looking at the financing products and what we're going to be looking at. And so I think that's also, though, a challenge that the team should take back and overlay when we do come back in May. So I will take that as a personal action item.
Those are my questions. I just want to thank you again for, Ms. Johnson Hall, for your team, for the teamwork, and the brilliance of the staff you have assembled.
Thank you, Member Russell.
If I may jump in, I think you raised a number of the issues. I thought, I totally loved the presentation as well, and the accomplishments are worthy. I'm glad we get to celebrate them midway through the year with you all. I wanted to get to the goals. I don't think that they're lofty enough at some level, and I think that you raised one issue, which is the relationship between the housing investment and meeting sustainability or the Strategic Growth Council goals. I think that there's tremendous amount of investment happening with transportation, and there's amazing investments happening now through like the behavioral health systems, all of these things that we should be part of and connected to. And so I think that somehow we've got to be elevating and pushing the goals to having these great outcomes. I think this question about preservation, for example, is a great, I agree. I was going to say the same thing. There's like 100 different definitions of preservation. So let's think about what do we mean, and is it about creating these healthy, vibrant neighborhoods, right? And so what does that mean in terms of our role, and what is a neighborhood? How do we help create those great neighborhoods that have then high-performing schools and kids doing great in those schools? I mean, I feel like there's these other outcomes that we should be part of that really drives the work. And creates that North Star for CalHFA. And I think this conversation around scarcity versus, what'd you say, scarcity versus abundance, right? That I get it, and I feel like our vision should be on the abundance side. Like if we had the perfect world, what do we want to be doing? Because we got to be striving towards that, right? Another area, we have to ask the question, what's CalHFA's role in reducing and ending homelessness in this state, right? It is the number one issue. I think all of us, well, I shouldn't say all of us, many of us think that it's the number one issue. It's our new mayor in San Jose says it's his number one issue. I think Governor Newsom has really elevated it. And I don't think CalHFA needs to become a funder or necessarily involved in PSH or interim housing or home key developments, but have to ask the question, how does home ownership, how does the rental, how does the preservation then provide the opportunities or less pressure or less inflow into homelessness that then we can finally figure out how we can do the exit strategies, right? We were talking here briefly, whispering back and forth during earlier presentations about the pressure that's going to happen to the home ownership world, and if there's a lot of pressure there and fewer people are entering into home ownership, does that mean that there's going to be pressure for them into the rental market and then more pressure downwards? And so it's what's our role within all of that? And I think that's the strategies and vision I would love. I know I've said this before. There are so many partners at the state that should be identified as the key partners for CalHFA. Yes, Gustavo's not here. HCD, yes. The Treasurer's Office, yes, TCAC and CIDLAC, but it's also the Superintendent of Public Instruction, right? I mean, so many kids are in affordable housing funded by CalHFA. Let's think about how do we really create not just the transaction, but then the home for those kids to do really great and to really partner up with, through the superintendent's office, to partner up with the schools at the local level. I mean, that'd just be one example. I mean, there's so many state partners that are just natural partners that I think we should be grabbing onto. And I agree with you, Stephen. It's the link, right, between our transactions and someone else's transactions that then becomes this huge strategy, this really amazing goal for the state. And so I would like to just keep pushing the strategies, if that makes sense.
I think you will be pleasantly surprised, not only in the next couple of agenda items, but in Ms. Johnson Hall's already been cooking up a couple things on the homelessness and maybe some item that Ms. Tarianen will be presenting as a teaser later on in future meetings. So, but I think for your feedback, I appreciate that, because I think when we talk about the objectives and the initiatives, we really do want to be able to be challenged and to grow and to make sure that we are stretching ourselves in an efficient, effective way. There's a lot of people doing a lot of great work, so how do we leverage one another?
Say is, folks, keep buckle up, because there's some wonderful things that are going to be birthed out. I'm really proud of the team for the work that they have committed so far. Sort of behind the scenes, things you don't see are the meetings that these folks are having, the hours that they have committed to this, the passion that they put into it. Sometimes I kind of walk by the war room, and I'm like, I want to get in there too, but I committed to them this. Here's my vision. I'm going to trust in the process, and I want you to invest in this process. So that means that I have to give them space to do the work. So what you will see in the next iteration of this is some of the things that you are saying. Actually, Director Prince, I agree with you with that. I know, but I'm trying to be formal here. Part of that trusted partner piece is stepping outside of our universe in ways that we haven't done and I think that is what's going to be the success that we will experience over the next 3 years is how we interface and interact with those groups is going to be how we become that trusted partner. That's just one mark that I see that these folks are striving for. So I can't say how proud I am of them for this presentation, but also for the things that you don't see. I'm proud of them for that work as well. So thank you, team.
I have one last question, and it relates to the home ownership, where we see African American families at 8%, which equals the same amount as unknown. Clearly, there's been an understanding of the difference, let's just say, in the home ownership opportunities and investments among black families. But even with the initiative acknowledging the discrepancies and looking at how we can begin to address that, what are some of the ongoing challenges that you think that you're identified or that are contributing to those numbers? I mean, when we get to the same number as unknown, that shares that there's still a great deal of opportunity and work to do to increase those numbers. But just share a little bit about what you all have experienced, because I already know that you targeted or had special outreach for African American families.
Yeah, so thank you for the question. So those numbers, the 8% in African American home ownership in our first-time home buyers, I think generally we like to look at how does that compare to the statewide population, which is at about 6%. So we're glad to see that we are generally outperforming in terms of the statewide composition of African American homeowners, but we know that there's more to do. And so as you alluded, we have absolutely as part of our equity and inclusion goals, we've undertaken the Building Black Wealth initiative. And then as part of rolling out every single program that we roll out, we have particular goals in terms of marketing and outreach to make sure that we're meeting the needs of those historically underserved communities. And so we take great care with each of these programs, with our partnerships with community-based organizations to make sure that we're getting the word out. And I'm really excited to see how well the Dream for All program can perform in terms of helping folks to access home ownership that historically have been deprived access to the capital and mortgage markets. I think that this program can really go a long way, and we're certainly excited to partner with any number of those partners and community-based organizations to bring that program.
Is there currently any connection with the Federal Home Loan Bank? I know that they too have a program that's targeting African Americans due to the discrepancy, and so to leverage those marketing opportunities.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we've connected on that front. We have an existing relationship with the Federal Home Loan Bank. We have a financing relationship, and I think that that's a great suggestion, that to the degree they have a marketing campaign centered around that, our marketing team can find some synergies with them to take a look at that. I think one of the things I would just add to Ellen's comments, which is that our best and greatest way of sort of achieving better outcomes on the homeownership front is through our marketing and outreach and connection, because I think, as most of you know, statutorily, we're not a direct lender, so we don't have like a direct connection to the borrower. We rely on a lender network that are brokers and financial services institutions that are churning mortgages and sort of going out there. So it's a question of like connecting with them as well as connecting with the folks that are out there seeking home ownership, to make them aware of our products and make sure that they can access them as easily as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director. We are actually meeting with the Federal Home Loan Bank, I believe it's either this week or next, where I participated in a working group or a conference panel where they wanted to hear some of the things that California Housing Finance Agency was doing, and that precipitated not only a conversation, a follow-up where they're like, we need to come and talk to you all, which we're happy to engage with them on, but also other conversations with other entities. NARAP is reaching out. There's so many folks now who are reaching out to us, and a lot of that was frankly precipitated by the success of the Forgivable program, which Ellen has mentioned in previous conversations was one that there was not a lot of faith and confidence would actually have such that it would work. And yet it did. And it did for first-time home buyers. It did for 80% or below. And it did within our unique demographic numbers were also really off the chart. And so I think we're making headway. I think we would all say that there's a lot more work to do, so we invite ideas from the board, and we will be moving into those spaces, as I've mentioned, in ways that we just haven't done. We have done, but we're going to elevate the work around that as well. So thank you. Thank you for your comments.
I think we're going to need to move along. Just real quick, to keep the protocol. Melissa, if you could check to see if there are any public comments, questions. Again, 3-minute limit.
So members of the public that are viewing us by Zoom, if you'll raise your hand, we'll call upon you. We do not have any raised hands at this time.
Thank you. I'd like to thank you all for a great presentation.
Sorry.
Well done. Good work. Thank you.
Yep.
And next up, we've got a special guest, Justin Cooper with ORC, who his bio is in the packet. He's a co-head of public finance. I remember him from my old life. We've really had privileged to have someone who's with real depth of expertise and experience. So, Justin, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's nice to see everyone. As Board Chair Cervantes said, I'm Justin Cooper with ORC Harrington and Sutcliffe. We've got about probably going on 50-year-long relationship with CalHFA, which we're very proud of, and we love working with the agency. I'm going to talk a little bit about middle-income housing, which has become a hot topic in recent years. So let's go to the next slide and just start with some definitions. What do we mean when we say middle-income housing, sometimes also called workforce housing, sometimes called essential housing? I prefer the term middle-income housing, so that's what I'm using. Middle-income housing really means in the rental multifamily space, housing that is rent restricted, so not market rate, but restricted to households with incomes at or below, that not below market, but more than 60% of AMI. So 60% of the area median income, as you heard Mike Novogradek and others talking about earlier, is that's for the most part where the low-income housing tax credit program tops out, and that's sort of what we think of as low-income housing. And there's this whole population of people who rent, are not able, cannot afford to buy homes, especially in coastal parts of the United States and in other high-cost areas like resort towns. They can't afford to buy a home. They make too much money to qualify for low-income housing support. They can't get into a tax credit project. They can't get a Section 8 voucher, any of those things. And they're living a long way from work, further to Board Member Russell's comment earlier about sprawl. They're living farther and farther from work, and it's costing them a lot of time. It's costing our economy a lot that they're driving around and don't have a decent place to live near their jobs. And as you are probably aware, this population includes, but is not limited to, first responders, nurses, firefighters, police officers, also teachers, and others in that who tend to fall in that middle income range and are struggling right now in large parts of the United States and especially California to find safe and sanitary housing. Next slide, please. So for most of I've been doing multifamily rental housing finance for 20 years, and for most of my career, most of that period, people would call once in a while. They'd sort of say, hey, what do you have? Like, what kind of things can we do for this population, this missing middle? Somebody's earning 80% of AMI and can't qualify for anything. And my answer was, write your congressman. We got nothing, because we didn't have anything really. There just wasn't much. The tax credit program, everything's set up to go up to 60% of AMI. And we had home ownership programs for first-time home buyers, of which the agency obviously runs a very successful one, but those didn't really get down to that level, especially in California. So there just wasn't much there, and and states had not been providing a whole lot of subsidy at this level. So that's kind of the background and the baseline. The public sector and the private sector, so public agencies and developers really woke up to this, in my view, in the last 4 or 5 years and the pressure just started to build and build and build. We need to do something about this. And then the bond market suddenly cooperated. Federal government started printing money like it was going out of style. Interest rates went really low. Credit spreads tightened up to the point that seemed like bond investors would buy almost anything. And then we had this explosion of financing for middle income housing in 2020 and 2021. Next slide, please. So that's what I call the first wave, which involved in California some 30 or 40 transactions done through what are called joint powers agencies, joint powers authorities. Those of you who are familiar with the California public finance landscape know about JPAs. In California, those transactions resulted in the acquisition and deed restriction. The acquisition of 14,000 units, which are then going to be restricted with what amounts to contractual rent control and set-asides at certain income bands. That all happened in 2020 and 2021. At the same time, there have been some projects done in Texas. A really interesting project done in Sun Valley, Idaho. I mentioned resort towns earlier. That's an interesting application of the sort of middle-income financing paradigm or structure. And a couple of states, Idaho and Colorado, have established specific state-level workforce housing authorities. I don't think they've actually done much yet, but they exist. And there's also an entity in the Bay Area, California Bay Area, the San Francisco Bay Area, the Bay Area Housing Finance Agency, that may be getting into something like this as well. So that was kind of the first wave. And if we can go to the next slide before we get to the second wave, I want to describe a little bit about how this all works. I'm not going to get real technical on it, but the way I think about it, and bear in mind this is sort of financial analysis from someone with a humanities degree and who can barely turn on a calculator. So just like, it's just kind of how I see things, honestly. I think there are three big drivers that have made middle-income housing finance possible, financing middle-income rental housing possible in the last few years, as compared to before. One is the spread between taxable and tax-exempt bonds. And as somebody, I think it was Albert, was mentioning earlier, that's something that goes up and down over time, but it's generally there. In the last couple of years, actually, it sort of went away because all the rates were so low, but nobody really cared because money was so cheap, it didn't matter if it was really cheap or really, really cheap. But generally speaking, tax-exempt rates will be, they should be, in theory, 30% or so lower than taxable rates. They're not always that low. Sometimes it gets even farther. But that's one driver that you capture. So the way I think about it is you've got a project that you want to finance, and it may not, and all other things being equal, it's unlikely in California that you could do a middle-income rent-restricted project and finance it without any kind of subsidy. It could happen from time to time, but generally you're going to need some subsidy. So one form of subsidy is the tax exemption on the bonds, federal and state. The second is you can get a real property tax abatement or exemption. If you can do that, that's a really big driver. That might be the biggest driver, possibly bigger than the first one. Essentially, if you're running a project and you're the owner of a project and you don't have to pay, every dollar that you don't have to pay on property tax, you can spend on debt service. That's it. It just falls straight through to the bottom line, and you can use it on debt service, so you can borrow more money, you can buy a bigger project, or really you can put that project into that money in that you've saved into restricting rents. And the third is there's kind of a credit arbitrage, a relationship between the bond market and the mortgage market that can be exploited, leveraged, let's say, to put more subsidy into a project. The mortgage market, as most of you know, and certainly most of the people behind me know, is a pretty rule-bound market, right? Everything's 80% LTV, 120 debt service coverage, 35-year AM, whatever it is. There are these rules. The bond market doesn't operate like that. The bond market does not place nearly as high a premium, doesn't require as much of a premium to take construction risk, and will allow higher leverage and certain other things that you can't get in the mortgage market. So if you take those three things together, more favorable terms in the bond market, the tax exemption on the bonds, and a real property tax abatement, you can generate enough subsidy effectively to put it into the project so that then you can operate it not as a market rate project, but as a rent restricted project with targeting the middle income. So that's how this worked. Next slide, please. There are different types of bonds, and this is where it gets a little technical, that can be used for middle-income housing, and I'm only mentioning this because there's been some confusion about it. I think that people think financing middle-income housing means you have to have a JPA, or you have to have governmental purpose bonds, or you have to have something like that. It's actually just that the idea is financing a middle-income housing project and pulling together enough subsidy and public sector support so that you can drive those rents down. That's the goal, and you can do it a number of different ways with different types of bonds. You can do it with governmental bonds, which means, well, they're a type of bonds that CalHFA doesn't typically issue, but we can talk more about that if people are interested. You can do it with 501c3 bonds, which people may know about. You can do it with exempt facility bonds, which are the bonds for which you get volume cap from CIDLAC. And you can also use taxable bonds. And I've got a chart at the back of the presentation that lays out what these different types of bonds are. I don't think anyone on this board needs to memorize that, but it may be helpful to know that there are different types of bonds that can be used, and CalHFA can issue all of those types of bonds, in case anyone's wondering. Next slide, please. So then what happened is in the last year or so, the bond market moved away, rates went up, credit spreads blew out. Various policymakers and others at the same time observed some practices in the middle income finance area that gave them concern. And basically, the first wave ended. So there hasn't been one of these deals done. I think the last one that closed in April of 2022. And I think that the important thing to note, though, is I don't believe that we've reached the end on middle-income housing at all. So what's happened is the bond yields went up, investment returns on apartment buildings stayed relatively stable, and there was even a period where bond yields were higher than apartment cap rates, apartment investment yields. So, you know, you don't have to be a really sharp at finance to know that if you're borrowing at 5 to invest at 4, you're probably not going to make a lot of money. So that just kind of killed those deals for a while. And there was also, as it says here, blowback in California against JPA deals. But I think what really matters is that the Overton window has shifted. It is no longer acceptable to say to somebody who says, a public sector person, private sector person, what are we doing about middle income households? It's no longer acceptable to say, sorry, we don't have anything for that. You now have to have an answer. And that's where I get really interested about in what's going to come next. I think there will be a second wave on middle income housing finance. I think it'll be more and better regulated. I think there'll be more emphasis on new construction as opposed to just acquisition and preservation. I think we're going to see creative ways of contributing land and other equity-like sort of subsidies into these projects so that the leverage is a little lower, whether it's real leverage or sort of constructive leverage, depending on how you think about it, but to basically lower the amount of leverage. And I think we're also going to see more participation from employers this coming from employers like health systems, higher ed, resort towns, et cetera. And I see a question already.
Well, actually, first a comment. I like the upward beat of this. This is exciting. Please explain an Overton window to me. I'm an architect. Is it a function? I mean,
I think it's something I learned from like MSNBC or something. I believe someone can Google this and tell me if I have it right. I think it's the range of policy outcomes that are considered possible. So, for example, I mean, maybe bringing it a little close to home, but the Overton window on women's reproductive rights has shifted in recent years. The range of what's possible, yeah.
The only, according to what I just Googled, it's political possibilities. I don't know if that matters or if that's true.
That is actually an important distinction, so.
That's what, I just Googled it because you said to.
you had 4 positive points, so I really want to kind of go with that flow right now. So back to you, sir.
Oh, no, that was the end of the presentation. Seriously, you can go to the appendix, but that's it.
So Justin, thank you. I was going to give you bonus points for even attempting to use Overton window. It's a first in my career. We're going to, I think, to spare the board the bond chart, although as much as we'd love to get into the details of that, I want to be cognizant of time because we're behind schedule. But I want to give the board an opportunity to ask any questions or providing comments to Justin here on the presentation. And Member White.
Justin, this is a great presentation. You spoke on a lot of different things that I've talked to the board about in terms of middle-income housing. Matter of fact, my dissertation is around middle-income housing, although I go to 61% and above. You started at 60. I'm reserving the right to reach out to you.
That would be great. And for the future, if I'm going to present and someone in the audience has completed their dissertation in the topic at hand, I'd like to know that in advance. But otherwise, that's great. Yeah, clearly.
I think that this matches up with the strategic planning, and I know I've shared it before, the amazing book that's done by the Institute on Mixed Income Communities, right? That there are some goals that can be achieved through mixed income communities that we should be aspiring towards. things around not just inclusion of those who have been disadvantaged or wealth creation for people within the community, anti-displacement, anti-gentrification, but there's also around social cohesion. And so I think that if we can frame this, again, in this elevated conversation, I feel like, and I know I'm usually the negative one on this topic, right? I got to admit that 30% and below are who I think are really being left behind in this market. That's who we're focusing on in my community. But as I think about it, it becomes a little bit easier to talk about if we don't just say, well, it's the firefighters and officers, but it's really about it's inclusive of low income and very low income members, and it really creates this vibrant neighborhood where there's shared prosperity. I feel like that would really be able to frame the program in a way that I think we can, all get behind a little bit easier. Does that make sense?
I'd like to see if there's any questions or comments from the public. Melissa, could you check, please? And again, 3 minutes or less.
So any members of the public that are watching via Zoom, please raise your hand if you'd like to make a comment at this time. We have no raised hands at this time.
So Justin, I'd like to thank you. This is really clear, succinct, and the way you framed it I thought was very helpful. And I remember these acquisition projects towards the end of my career. It's interesting to see what happened with that and likely what the next wave is as you framed it. So This is very useful. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. And there. So we're going to move on further into our agenda. Agenda item 7, CalHFA Multifamily Housing Production Pilot Program. Erwin Tam will walk us through this, and as I understand it, really are talking about a pilot program?
Yes.
Which we'll talk about further, which is you're going to sort of give us the framework here of things for us to consider.
Exactly. I actually have this in the next 5 agenda items after this one, so buckle in, everybody. We'll be here till midnight or 1 a.m. Just as long as it takes. I will make a point that this is an informational item that is in front of the board. This one in particular about our pilot program. The next 5 thereafter are action items for the board to consider, and those ones will discuss actually the financing activities of the agency. But this again is an informational in front of the board. No action is asked to be taken at this time. So let's start with the first slide. So CalHFA actually has a big mandate and mission, and it is to be a key part of the engine of production of affordable housing in the state. And under the direction of the executive director, last year, we updated our mission statement, leading off with one of the key features of the CalHFA, the concept of investment. And as a self-funded agency, our long-term programs must continue to be self-supporting. Under this new mission, the executive director has challenged us to do more. I'm going to paraphrase a little liberally. Since I joined the agency, the executive director has always maintained we can't do the same old things the same old way with the same old results. And we have taken that to heart as staff. We're constantly working to improve the state's housing finance landscape by leveraging new tools and strategies. That's why I'm here today to present this informational item to you. Staff is seeking input from this board on the creation of a financially sustainable program that addresses the housing needs of the state. Let's go to the next slide, please. As you know, as a state, we've fallen short of our housing production goals by some margin. And this is not for the lack of financial investment or willpower. Since 1986, every state in this country relies upon the issuance of tax-exempt private activity bonds that require volume cap allocation and are often paired with tax credits to fund affordable housing construction. In our state, we face twin challenges, one where the demand far exceeds supply in both the availability of housing units and the availability of volume cap to finance new housing construction. And if it's our sole strategy in California, it would take us over 80 years to hit our 8-year RHNA target for affordable housing. That has resulted in the urgent need to explore efficient and impactful financing strategies that enable the state to overcome volume cap, tax credits, and other limitations on housing supply. In essence, we're living in a digital world, and we're still relying upon the same old VHS-era financing strategy. So what are we going to do about it? And how are we going to invest in housing in California and in the future of this state? CalHFA is exploring a new pilot program. On the next slide. It is to own, finance, construct, operate, and maintain affordable housing, multifamily housing in California in partnership with local public agencies. We believe that this pilot program represents a new and long overdue approach to housing finance in the state. That's it in a nutshell. On the next slide, here's the value proposition for the pilot program. First, CalHFA ownership. As Justin mentioned in his presentation, tax-exempt governmental purpose bonds require governmental ownership. And the agency or an affiliate of the agency will need to own the project. As the owner, CalHFA staff would provide management and oversight of the process. This is one of the key differences between the current government ownership models whereby CalHFA, as a state housing finance agency, can leverage its own experience and expertise for the benefit of local public agencies. Second, local partnership. From the local public agency's perspective, this plan allows them to partner with CalHFA to get a one-stop solution for their financing and housing development needs in exchange for the land they contribute to the project. This land, which can be excess or underutilized parcels, further eliminates the need for land or property acquisition costs. As many of us have read in the media, there have been struggles created for school districts across the state due to lack of affordable housing. The challenge for local schools to attract and retain staff has made districts search for solutions that go above and beyond short-term fixes. Our pilot program proposal has been well received by some of the K-12 districts we have talked with. Given this encouraging response and using the information that we have researched with the California Department of Education, we're confident that this pilot program is worth pursuing and can be replicated across the state successfully. School districts we have spoken to about this pilot program are interested in the ability to use this affordable housing to attract and retain new staff. In addition to the social benefit of having employees potentially living closer to where they work, there's also another benefit: the environmental benefit of less carbon emissions from commuting from longer distances. We are also exploring financing options made possible by the Federal Inflation Reduction Act. We believe that this program can help the state achieve its climate goals. The current go-it-alone strategy for local public agencies in housing typically requires one of two things, which are voter-approved general obligation bonds, which are tax increases on the local populations, and general fund debt. This housing pilot program does not currently require direct financial contributions from any local public agency, meaning no time or effort in running a political campaign and no general fund risk from residential housing construction. Lastly, equity ownership. As a self-supporting agency, CalHFA's lending activities need to generate enough revenue to cover its operating costs. This pilot program also seeks to be financially sustainable, that the equity investment by the agency results in an appropriate rate of return on the agency's investment. Over time, assuming a successful program, we would expect that net revenues generated be reinvested into future projects. On the next slide, if you will. In line with California's mandate to meet the housing needs for low and moderate income Californians, this plan addresses the critical gap in housing, the missing middle income segment. Further, by eliminating the need to rely on limited SIDLAC and pool and TCAC tax credits, this strategy uniquely positions the agency by supplementing the overall housing production estate without being duplicative. Lastly, it complements the agency's existing subsidy and perm loan financing programs and offers a sustainable financing program in line with the agency's strategic plan. On the next slide, you'll see the ownership structure. To implement this program, a newly formed government instrumentality of CalHFA will be formed to assume ownership of the projects. As this is an informational item only today, this board is not being asked to approve neither the funding nor the legal structure required to move forward. Instead, we will be coming, as staff will be coming back to this board in the future for approvals. In terms of structure, you can also see the anticipated ground lease with a local public agency for the project. In addition, while not required, We would also explore other potential partnerships and sources of funds from both public and private sources. Public sources of funds could take the form of a subsidy loan or waiver in impact fees, and the agency already has a private partner in our successful recycle bond program and would seek additional private capital for this pilot program. So what's next? CalHFA is planning on releasing a request for indications of interest for potential local public agencies in early April, and that will run for a 4-month period, so it would be due in July. This RFI is not meant to be difficult or onerous for potential local partners to complete. We're just simply trying to ascertain if local public agencies would be interested in partnering with CalHFA under the general terms I just described. We would also be interested in knowing more about the potential sites that they identify as suitable for multifamily housing, as well as their employees who will be interested in living in a new multifamily project. On the next slide, you'll see some of the questions we'll be coming back to you on. The May board meeting is the first potential date for the board to consider forming an ownership entity for the project. After the return of the RFI in July, we expect to present findings to the board at its next meeting. We plan on summarizing some of the key highlights for the board on this RFI, including demand, employee base, and progress made to date from the respondents as listed on this page. I think in summary, I know it's a pretty quick presentation. This is an informational presentation to the board, to you, our board of directors, and this represents a first step in this pilot program process. This is a fact-finding exercise led by the staff here at CalHFA. And we are looking to you to share your feedback and expertise to help shape this pilot. And for those interested in going the extra mile, we're also looking for a champion, a CalHFA champion that can help us identify potential partners throughout the state to enable us to help more Californians have a place to call home. That concludes my presentation. I can take any questions at this point from the board.
Thank you, Erwin, very much. I'd like to open the floor for any questions, comments by members of the board. Member Russell?
Yes, thank you, and I appreciate the creativity that has gone into this, and I think, when we talk about the need to go from scarcity to abundance thinking, this is a way of looking at new resources that are lying untapped. And I guess I just want to ask some questions for the record, because I know, I work with a lot of developers in San Diego, and so one of the first questions that will come up is this competing in any way with the resources that would be available to them to produce housing in their standard manner?
Right. No, because it's part of, as on that slide showed earlier, this is actually a multifaceted approach. We need a couple of things to happen. We need as a governmental agency, to be the owner of the project, to be able to issue the tax-exempt bonds to leverage. So that doesn't currently exist, right now. I think we also are looking for subsidy in form of essentially a low-cost or low-cost land lease from a local public agency. That doesn't exist right now. And we're also putting a equity rate of return, or expecting sort of a sustainable rate of return from our equity investment. So all of those three things need to work in concert together for this program to happen. So I don't think that this is a completely new and different way and approach of construction of affordable housing in California. So it's not competitive to what exists out there currently.
No, and I appreciate it. I wanted to make sure that's one of I think the key issues we're going to find is where are we going to run into resistance to the idea? Because I think fundamentally we need to bring everything to the table we can. If we're unlocking potential that's not being used, I think that's the real value here. As far as meeting a demand, I mean, we do know, I know from my local market, from San Diego County, that's a huge demand, and one of the local school districts even wrote into their most recent school bond measure, mostly for facilities, but I think it was $100 million perhaps for teacher housing. They want to use their land and they want to do housing, but they don't know what to do with it. They're great at doing facilities. They have no experience in doing housing development. But San Diego Unified School District. Yeah, thank you. That's a fair question. But so let me ask, what does raise the question, though, is the expertise within the agency for the entire development process. What kind of, what is your vision there?
Right. So right now, as a pilot program, we are looking to leverage, obviously, our own staff resources, but to the extent, we would need to build it out for a pilot, we will not build it out for a pilot program. In fact, we would probably hire a group of consultants that will help us, work with us to help manage the process, to bring their expertise along with the agency's experience and expertise and partner with the local public agency to develop their land. I think that If you look at the current reports, out there talking about surplus land, especially with school districts, I think the current strategy is we have 1,000 school districts, we should have 1,000 experts. They should all become experts in housing. And that doesn't seem to be the most feasible way, right? It's
That's
like,
kind.
right? It doesn't, that seems to be, yeah. Right. So it really is, I think that through this partnership, we can leverage, both of our strengths, and also part of it is that, general obligation bonds typically don't fund the entire construction as well. So you're going to need to come out of pocket to issue, general fund backed debt. And, just based on my experience, most school districts across the state aren't flush with cash, so I don't think that they're going to be really super gung-ho about leveraging their own balance sheet in terms of constructing affordable housing, because, that just, it's a risk that an additional risk they will place on themselves. And as their partner, we would be shouldering that risk on their behalf.
Yeah, no, I think that's important. Well, so last two comments here. One is I appreciate the use of the middle income terminology rather than workforce housing. I've said it before, I'll say it again. We often talk about, when people talk about workforce, they say 60 to 120 or 80 to 120, as if people below 60% AMI are not a part of the workforce, when in fact they're some of the most hardworking people in our society right now. So thank you also, Mr. Cooper, for similarly using the phrasing as you did. And then generally, I just want to say, I recognize this is a departure. It's a new venture potentially if we decide to go down this route. I want to commend staff for leading this, to Director Johnson Hall for giving license for you to be creative. And I think that we owe it to ourselves to see if this is a viable route to move forward. So rather than be scared by some of the concerns of, is this our lane? I feel like we have something unique to bring to the table here, and I personally would like to see us pursue this direction. Thank you.
Yeah, so, Stephen, you always hit the nail on the head so many different ways, so thank you. So there are a couple of big themes I think are really exciting, right? So when you go and look at the success of social housing in Vienna, it's because 100 years ago they made a commitment to public ownership. They're now investing $400 million a year in a community of 2 million people. And that $400 million comes from the real estate that's owned publicly, half through the housing authority, half through limited profit entities. And so this idea of having public ownership and then creating the revenue through those properties to invest back in, it's the long haul, the long vision, but it's like the right one in so many ways. I think the second issue, and I asked the question of Michael Novogradic about what's the new wave and non-tax credit financing, right? Because that's what we've got to get to. So it's not just about, it's about predictability for the developer or for the structure. Get rid of some of the cost escalations that happen within the tax credit program or the multiple applications where you don't get funded and you as the developer, you build in ways to make up for that. So that predictability, right? I think that we should be looking at not just the financing, but then the alternative construction methodologies and what are the ways that you can still accelerate the process. Because again, the time cost of money is one of the issues. I personally think CEQA is the straw man being held up as the cost driver to affordable housing issue. I think that it's many other things, way more than that. And I think I would love to see again, as this, because I agree. I actually said to Lourdes as she was leaving, this sounds like an idea I would have come up with, so I mean that in just the best possible way. I mean, this is bold and crazy, right? And it's like taking, it's the third thing, it's taking the assets that you have here at CalHFA and investing them into the community, getting the return on that investment. I think it's great, right? Without making an investment in a for-profit owned or a nonprofit owned or someone else's, but in an asset that you guys have. With that said, I think the risks are really huge, right? Development is not easy, and let me be clear, it's not just that it's not easy, it has failures and and I think that's something that we have to ask ourselves, are we willing to take on that risk with CalHFA? And then I think that there has to be some broader goals, right? So not just the mixed income communities, but really thinking about how do we go in and make vibrant neighborhoods? And again, I think CalHFA, with the dollars it has and its strength, can then make it not just be a transaction, but something transformative for a neighborhood or community. It can really focus on mobility as an issue. It could focus on transit-oriented development and really be sustainable in its approach. I mean, I think that there's some values that could really be elevated with the dollars and investment that CalHFA makes. So I have huge reservations, but at the same time, it seems pretty exciting and really matches up with the same things we've been talking about in Santa Clara about how do we create a new revenue stream, a new way, a new approach. How do we scale up? Because at this kind of current 800 years, whatever it is, it's taking us way too long by any measurable, or any way we multiply our current production. It's just going to take way too long. So I applaud trying to figure out a new way of approaching things.
Chair Cervantes, we have Maria Cabildo, Director Cabildo, who's participating remotely, who has her hand raised.
Thank you.
Okay.
And so we'll go with Member Cabildo. Welcome. I'm glad you're able to join us.
Thank you, and I'm so sorry I can't be with you. I had it presented from my board of directors this morning. But my questions were very similar to Member Prince's. And I too going to share, I just think the thinking is so creative. And thinking about kind of our increasing knowledge around social housing. I'm curious around, are we talking about housing that's going to be affordable in perpetuity, right? Which is something that we don't have right now with tax credit deals. And so I'm just curious, what are you thinking of? Is this something we can count on to be affordable 100 years from now and beyond?
I think part of where we're trying to explore is with the actual local partners, and we would work out the affordability with them and the duration with the actual party that's providing the land. So I know it's a flexible statement, but we're in sort of the exploratory phase of this pilot program. But that's a good point, and we would definitely add that into our RFI to see what duration they would like to see in terms of the affordability requirements.
And I guess just finally, I do the comments that have been made by the previous members around criteria around selection of sites. I mean, if you have an overwhelming response from school districts, how will you decide? And I think you're really looking at the kind of impact that can be had in communities in terms of enhancing communities should be one of the criteria for selecting partners. Hopefully, there are going to be hundreds of partners that want to do this, but just wanting to make sure that the impact that we're looking for is achieved through the work.
Will do. I think that we are using K-12 districts as representatives of the potential partners, but I think for the purposes of the RFI, we would be open to any local public agency to partner with because, again, we're just it's a fact finding. We're really trying to figure out who's interested out there, what vacant parcels seem to be the most feasible to partner with for construction on, and if there's any progress that they have made individually already. So everybody seems to be in a very slightly different phase of their own exploration. We're not requiring any of that actually. If they're starting from square one and they are looking out across the street and they see a vacant lot and they write to us and say that this is all we got, we would consider that. Again, the purpose of this is not to create an onerous lift for any of the local public agencies, but again, have the state partner with local districts to sort of identify and work with them to see again what the potential inventory is and what the potential partnerships would be.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Cabildo.
I love it. Look, I'm a developer in disguise. And one of the challenges that all of the developers have is really this whole tax credit cycle and its inability to really be able to calculate when your project or if your project will ever be approved. So in theory, I support it wholeheartedly. I have one caveat I'd like for you all to consider, because I understand this is a pilot. But to really kind of have the kind of impact that are going to address the arena numbers or the deficiencies, you've got to be able to scale. And so on behalf of all of the developers, who have extensive experience in developing multifamily housing. I would hope that either in the pilot stage or after the successful pilot and we scale up, that you, instead of carrying the weight of developing CalHFA's own development department for the sake of scaling up, that you really look at the partners who've already been in the trenches for decades, who already understand the municipality codes and guidelines, who already have very experienced development staff who could partner with you and those other municipalities in being able to really move these projects forward. The reason that developers aren't doing this now is because they don't have access to the resources that you have access to. If they did, we would not be in the situation that we currently find ourselves in, nor would many of these other agencies experience the kind of lack of housing. Universities have been approaching us, hospitals have been approaching us. The issue is we got to get in line in the tax credit line. If that didn't exist, I think this could definitely be a game changer with partnering with experienced developers and development agencies.
Right, and right now we're agnostic as to the actual sort of the construction entity, of that. And so, how do we deliver that project in terms of the pilot? That's a decision that's further down the road, and we can obviously reach out and partner with those firms that have the local experience at that point in time. But we kind of got to get there first. We got to go figure out who our where we actually feel like the best and most suitable projects for this pilot program, where they actually are, and who the partners that own the land are as well. So,
very good. Thank you.
Other comments, questions by members of the board? Member Farias and then Member White.
And what are we projecting timeline from thought of fleshing out, rolling out RFPs, or having stakeholder meetings? What are we thinking?
Right. So I think that we're going to run, based on feedback from some of the public agencies, that we're going to run a 4-month process. The goal is to get out a questionnaire probably in early April, run that through the end of July. Spend some time to figure out, summarize that to the board, and present that to the board at the subsequent meeting after July, and then figure out where we're going from there in terms of narrowing it down. So I think that the current thought is that we would select, up to 10 sites potentially for pre-development studies, which the agency would then fund, and then take it from there. So I think that's.
And how would you solicit, we're talking just for discussion purposes, so school districts throughout the state of California, we would just send a notification so that we're working on this project and kind of based on response, or how are we envisioning that outreach happening?
The agency has retained or has identified well, first of all, has retained an investment banking pool, of which who do cover school districts, among other potential local public agencies as potential clients. We will reach out to them. We've already reached out to some of the umbrella organizations for school districts, including the Community College League of California, which is obviously the umbrella for community colleges. And I think we also have reached out to CSBA, the California School Boards Association. So we're trying to get the word out, and that, obviously this is pending this discussion here in front of you as members of the agency's board of directors. But assuming that we receive positive feedback, we would then activate sort of our network to get the word out there that this is coming in April. And then after it comes, so I think we would work with our marketing division at CalHFA to spread the word out there to all potential local public agencies. And then again, I mentioned earlier at the end of when I closed my remarks, we need champions from this group. If you believe that this is potential, that this is a good thing for the agency to be doing, or we should explore it further, you as members of the board represent the agency and also have local constituents that you can call on, and we would more than welcome that engagement from members of the board to spread the word on our behalf.
I would just add, I mean, on the education space, I think Chair Savant said I just spoke about this. There is already, through associations, a huge movement, and the problem is obviously they have the land capacity, they just don't have the technical assistance. And we've talked about this in past board meetings, that these school districts are just not equipped to be able to kick off a major land use, but they are sitting on a huge viable resource that we all need, which is the land. And so I think a lot of thought process has to, from the most impacted, what I'm worried about is moving forward with this. I mean, the biggest that stands out to me is the more affluent communities being able to move forward with this very quickly, and versus the districts that are in neighborhoods that we really do need to be in. So I think, how do we create that equitability of having the right people at the table, and how do we offset that deficiency where these districts may have the land, but may not necessarily be able to rally the funds locally beyond the state funds, because obviously it's going to require a lot of public and private partnerships.
Yeah, I don't think we're looking for necessarily any local funds up front. In fact, that's the reason why I think we would be coming back to the board to seek funding perhaps for the development studies that we would need to actually select a pilot. Is we don't want to burden the local districts, because that would, we're trying to cast, again, the biggest and widest net possible, and to have a district say, no, we're not going to roll the dice and just see if, CalHFA would partner with us. In fact, we would select them, and we would fund out of the agency's own budget to see if they would be a suitable partner for us. The goal of our pilot program is to figure out whether or not this is a scalable project for all of California and not just parts of it. So I think that, part of the goal in selecting projects for the pilot program is selecting a representative sample of California to make sure that, that it is scalable across the entire state.
Thank you.
Thank you. Member White.
You mentioned it twice, so you have one champion. I have no caveats about this. I think it's a great idea, and just the one thing that I really like about it is the opening on the equity part, where you open it up for private investors, institutional investors, to invest alongside CalHFA or be the investor, which I think opens up just much more possibilities with this program when you're bringing in some institutional capital like pension funds or life insurance companies to invest alongside. So I'm a champion of this.
Thank you.
Executive Director Johnson Hall.
I am just delighted to hear the feedback from the board on this particular event, because as the team has already shared with you, I think that the answer to the housing crisis will be birthed out of innovation of new ideas, new concepts, stretching over the aisle and figuring out, how to do this a different way. As part of that, though, I just want to make sure that the board is aware that part of our work also will be, since this is so new, I do want to let you know that while that timeline is there for your thoughts, there's still other stakeholders within the state's ecosystem that I want to bring into this discussion. And so that may move a little bit depending upon the feedback. And I'm talking we're committed to making sure that we are in alignment with not only what you want to do, but, we don't work by ourselves. We're not in the universe by ourselves. We understand that we need to ensure that all of the administration is on board with this, and all, that didn't just walk out the door just because we're CalHFA. And so I personally believe that some work needs to be done in that area, and that might impact I want to just be very clear that might impact our timeline a little bit, but that doesn't mean that our commitment to innovation is not there, because it is. Those numbers that Mr. Tam started with in terms of our ability to deliver on affordable housing, they're important. We need to face the facts. We're in the middle of a housing crisis. And I am committed to doing that or coming up with ideas. But we're not swimming down a different stream from anybody else. Our goal is to address affordable housing in ways that we haven't done because we understand that we're in a crisis right now, and we need to figure it out. So thank you for your support in stepping out of the shadows and into the forefront. This is not easy. But we are committed to getting into this discussion and fighting like hell.
Thank you, Executive Director Johnson Hall. Are there any other comments or questions from members of the board? Since I'm on the board, I'd like to actually add my voice to this as well, which is I think this is a terrific concept. And I have to sort of applaud staff for the creativity and Tina, for you and your team to try to address, an aspect of one of our key issues in California, as the governor's talked about trying to enhance options for livability in the state. This gets at a population segment that, as I think someone mentioned earlier, you're a school teacher and you're driving an hour and a half to get to your classroom. It's just not acceptable because they can't afford to live in the community that they serve. And I look at the strategic goals that were discussed earlier, and this really hits at a bunch of those. There's one part where it says trusted advisor. I'd almost say we are ideally through this a trusted partner. And I'm picking up something that Member Prince mentioned earlier in terms of partnering with other agencies, which I think this really dovetails with very nicely, because you've got these other jurisdictions we talked about, especially school districts, that have certain assets, but not the other ability to sort of like make them work for their longer term need of having people who can actually afford to live in their community. So I think I understand this is a pilot project. There's really a lot of, this is all very conceptual. I think that Erwin has been very clear on that. And the way this looks in the end may be a bit different than what we're talking about now. I have this image in my mind of these circles which would represent a Venn diagram. At some point they connect, and we'll see how big that intersection is. But I think, just as a conceptual effort here to see if there's something there, it's like, yeah, this is something we ought to be pursuing. This is really something which is meaningful. And, and the thought of having a venture where we can help make a difference for California, I think this is something that gets us there. So thank you to staff very much for the presentation. Thank you, Erwin. Thank you, Tina, for your team. Being mindful of Bagley Keene, I'm going to ask Melissa to see if there are any public comments or questions. And we ask the members of the public to keep their comments at under 3 minutes.
Members of the public that are watching via Zoom, please raise your hand if you have a question, and we'll call upon you. Yes. We have Melissa Payne. Melissa, you can unmute your mic and participate.
Thank you for joining us.
Hi, good afternoon. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
This is my first CalHFA meeting, and I just wanted to start by saying how absolutely inspirational it's been since lunch to hear and learn more about the agency. I do work for a K-12 school district in the Bay Area, and I serve as a staff member on our current 7-Eleven committee. And I just wanted to speak on behalf of the community and the staff as we've been looking at middle income housing over the years for our own community, and just say that I think this is incredibly innovative, and just really wanted to express the interest that I've heard over the years from our staff members, our community, our board of trustees, and on behalf of the community, just kind of echo how incredibly beneficial something like this could really be to the communities that we serve. And thank you for your consideration today.
We appreciate your input. Any other public comments?
No, we do not see any additional hands at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. So this actually, I believe, concludes the workshop portion of our program, which is supposed to end at 2:06. I'll note that we're about 35 minutes past schedule here, but that's okay. Not bad. And so the next agenda items are various resolutions, starting with item 8 and through 12. And Erwin Tam, I believe you're going to walk us through each of these. And
I
there's a
am.
resolution to vote.
Yep. I think we're going to take a brief pause while this
Oh.
presentation comes up. There we are. Here we are. Well, that was fast. So now on to the action items. Again, Erwin Tam, Director of Financing, presenting to you agenda items 8 through 12. These agenda items are typically referred to as our annual financing resolutions. And the purpose of these resos is to authorize staff to proceed with the business of the agency through its single and multifamily lending programs. The resolutions delegate authority to the executive director and to certain members of staff to act within the authority given under the California Health and Safety Code to execute financings as authorized in each of the resolutions. While the official titles of each of the resos are longer, I'm going to refer to them by their basic functions. There are 4 resolutions that vary by production unit, single family and multifamily, and by type of financing authorized, bond and non-bond. The final resolution is the CIDLAC resolution that authorizes the agency to apply for volume cap for multifamily programs. Prior to the board's consideration of each of the resolutions, I will summarize the authority granted in the specific resolution, including the dollar amounts of delegated authority. Second, I will indicate how the agency has used the powers in each of these resolutions in the past. And lastly, I will inform the board about how CalHFA communicates to the board about how it has used the authority that has been given. So I think on the next page, is that, oh yeah, so this is just providing, again, the summary of the four flavors of the resolutions. Again, multifamily and single family, bond and non-bond. And then again, the volume cap authorization resolution, which again only applies to our multifamily programs. So we're going to start with agenda item number 8, commonly referred to as the multifamily bond resolution. Resolution 23-02 allows the agency to finance its multifamily permanent loan production through the issuance of bonds and allows the agency to hedge those commitments. In addition, the resolution authorizes the agency to act as issuer of conduit bonds and to conduct its volume cap recycling program. And I think it's important to note that we have issued $224 million of recycled volume cap, and that is a number that would not have happened but for our bond recycling program and for our partnership with Apple. As you know, the agency has also been developing a new indenture of trust for this issuance of bonds since retiring the old multifamily housing revenue bond 3 indenture last year. This resolution this year approves the form of the new multifamily indenture, which is included as an attachment in your packet, the new affordable housing revenue bond indenture. Due to some delays in the anticipated loan conversions, we expect to be in the market in late April. In addition to the issuance of bonds, the resolution allows for hedges for the agency's multifamily commitments. As a perm lender, the agency extends a fixed rate commitment during the typical 36-month construction period. And last year, we started a strategy to hedge these commitments. That currently results in a net position to the agency of a benefit of over $30 million to offset these higher interest rates. And if you wanted to look further at that number, there's an informational item that takes the form of a memo in the back of your packets today. Lastly, the board receives regular reports from the multifamily division and from the financing division on outstanding bonds and interest rate swap hedges. In addition, per policy, the board will receive notifications on the issuance of a preliminary official statement and a written summary after the issuance of any bonds. Staff recommends approval of Resolution 23-02. I will now take any questions.
Are there any questions or comments for Erwin from the board?
Short
Member
question.
Russell?
Thank you. Mr. Tam, so when it comes to, I see what the reporting the board includes. I know that there are thresholds of, when we expend these funds, there are thresholds of things that staff does, and there's thresholds where they have to come before the board. Is that embedded in these resolutions, or is that in other practices and procedures?
Yeah, that's in a separate resolution. I think you may be referring to the delegated authority for approval of the actual underlying loans given for our multifamily programs, and that is, I believe, underneath a separate resolution delegating the executive director authority to approve said loans of up to $15 million, I believe. And so all the other loans that you see in a typical through a typical calendar year are all above that dollar threshold. This agenda item actually allows for the issuance of bonds to fund those loans already committed to. In essence, this is the issuance of bonds rather than the actual agreement between us and a project to fund.
Okay. No, thank you. I appreciate that. And as a side note, then at some point this year, I'd like to look at some numbers as far as how many deals have fallen above and how many have fallen below that $15 million threshold,
Sure.
just so we get a sense of how many what percentage of the projects are we seeing?
I think I can, hopefully I'm not speaking out of school here. As I recall, for the MIP 2022 projects, I believe 9 of the 12 were above 15 million and came to the board for approval, and 3 went through senior loan committee and to the executive director for her approval via delegated authority from the authorizing resolution.
I'm curious, we adopted that resolution at some point in my history here. I think we realized I'm one of the old timers now, officially. But I'd just like to see it again. And I don't want to confuse today's hearing at all around that at all.
I think that is a fair question. I know that we are coming back to the board. We already have a pretty full, I have taken the liberty of putting a lot of things on your May agenda, including a readoption of various board policies, including potentially a discussion of senior loan committees. So
Super.
I think
Okay.
that's in delegated authority, and that is actually one of the things we are concerned about. Just make sure that we want to get into a routine of bringing policy back in front of the board, not because, just to kind of make sure that we're all on the same page.
Exactly.
Not because there are major changes needed, or even where we may not even recommend major changes, but just to make sure that we are all aware of what levels of, what's actually going on by policy.
And there's no intellectual history behind some of these decisions that not everyone was here for.
Right.
So I'd like my brains to be reminded of that. So I have no other questions. I'd be happy to move approval
Actually,
of.
We'll hold on that for just a second. Are there any other questions or comments from members of the board? I don't see any. Melissa, if you could check if there's any members of the public who have a question or comment. We ask individuals to keep their comments to 3 minutes or less.
Please raise your hand if you would be interested in making a comment at this time. No hands are raised at this time.
Thank you very much. I believe that Member Russell's primed to float a motion to approve resolution number 23-02.
So moved.
May I have a second, please? Second. Member White, thank you very much. Melissa, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Avila Farias? Ms. Cabildo?
Yes.
Chair Cervantes?
Yes.
Mr. Fiegels?
Yes.
Mr. Fernandez?
Yes.
Mr. Velazquez is absent. Ms. Grant?
Yes.
Mr. Prince? Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. White?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Resolution 23-02 is approved.
Thank you all very much. Erwin, if we could move to the next topic, which is 23-03.
Yes, agenda item 9, commonly referred to as the multifamily non-bond resolution. This resolution allows the agency to finance its multifamily permanent loan production through non-bond sources, including through the Federal Financing Bank and through state and agency sources. In the past, we've used both of those sources to fund multifamily loans, and just last week, CalHFA closed an FFB-funded permanent loan of over $16 million. Similar to the prior resolution, the board receives reports from the multifamily division relating to multifamily loans at each meeting. The staff recommends approval of resolution 23-03. I can take any questions.
Great. Are there any questions from members of the board on this particular resolution or topic? I don't see. So I just have one, which is, so this is non-bond funding. So you gave an example.
Yes.
So just like.
So Federal Financing Bank, yes. It is not a public issuance of bonds. It is, we have basically assigned a note to the federal government or the Federal Financing Bank in exchange. They guarantee a rate. We lock much like our borrowers lock a rate with us. We lock a rate with the Federal Financing Bank, and And when we choose to finance that, they essentially pay us for the loan. So it's a way to finance it without accessing bond markets. We constantly go back and forth between the two, whereby we are looking for best execution on the agency's behalf. Right now, it's actually, interestingly enough, tax-exempt bonds, I think you saw some of the charts that seem to have rallied in the agency's favor, so it may be more advantageous to issue bonds, public bonds, including because we had paper cost of issuance. Federal financing bank actually doesn't require cost of issuance, so in certain circumstances, actually, for the past probably year and a half, it probably was the better, superior way of executing for financing multifamily loans. But again, it is since, with the recent run-up in rates, it's actually since reversed itself. So it keeps our options open and so that the agency's financing staff can execute the best and lowest cost financing for its loans.
Right, that's helpful. Thank you very much. Melissa, if you could see if there's any members of the public who have questions or comments on this topic, and again, we ask individuals to keep it to 3 minutes or less, please.
Please raise your hand now if you would like to make a comment. No hands are raised at this time.
Thank you very much. I'd look for a motion to approve resolution number 23-03, please. So moved. Member Russell and Member Prince, thank you very much. Melissa, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Avila Farias? Yes. Ms. Cabildo?
Yes.
Chair Cervantes?
Yes.
Mr. Fiegels?
Yes.
Mr. Fernandez?
Yes.
Mr. Velasquez is still absent. Ms. Grant?
Yes.
Mr. Prince?
Yes.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. White?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Resolution 23-03 is approved.
Thank you very much. This is agenda item 10, which is now resolution number 23-04.
Agenda item 10 is commonly referred to as a single-family bond resolution. This resolution allows the agency to finance single-family mortgages through the issuance of bonds. The agency has not been an active issuer of single-family bonds, having last issued in 2011. In December, the agency used cash on hand to defease the remaining outstanding HMRB bonds. So that was the indenture that we had since 1982. And so we have defeased those remaining bonds. And we are currently preparing for an issuance of bonds underneath a new indenture under development for single-family production. We anticipate bringing a separate resolution to the board approving that new indenture at the regularly scheduled May meeting of this board. So that is not included with your packet, unlike the multifamily one. It's still a document we are working on, but we will bring it to the board for its consideration at the May meeting. The agency's outstanding bond balance with respect to single-family bonds is regularly reported in the financing division. I will make an editorial note that this, again, is sort of a stopgap measure between the two, because we won't, we won't have the new indenture until May, at which time we will ask the board for discrete approval of that new indenture and authority to issue bonds underneath the new indenture.
Okay. But you are seeking approval of this particular item here? So
Correct.
stopgap.
This is exactly. This is a just in case, if you will.
Just in
It's
case.
not. We don't anticipate issuing bonds really, but because we essentially have none outstanding on their HMRB. So.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, so as the Boy Scouts say, be prepared.
Exactly.
Are there any questions or comments from members of the board on this top resolution? I don't see any. Melissa, could you see if there's any public comment or questions? And again, we ask individuals to keep their comments at 3 minutes or less, please.
Please raise your hand if you'd like to make a comment. No hands are raised at this time.
Thank you very much. I'm looking for a motion to approve resolution 23-04. Member White motions to approve. Is there a second? Member Williams, thank you very much. We have a motion made and approved, seconded, to approve resolution number 23-04. Could you call the roll, Melissa, please?
Ms. Avila Farias?
Yes.
Ms. Cabildo?
Yes.
Chair Cervantes?
Yes.
Mr. Fiegels?
Yes.
Mr. Fernandez?
Yes.
Ms. Grant?
Yes.
Mr. Prince?
Yes.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. White?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Resolution 23-04 is approved.
Thank you. And we're on to agenda item 11, which is Resolution 23-05.
Agenda item 11 is referred to as the single-family non-bond resolution. This resolution allows the agency to finance single-family mortgages through non-bond sources, such as the TBA market and the specified pools, as discussed in the Lakeview presentation earlier today. As this is the primary method of financing for the agency's single-family programs, there is no limit for this amount. Staff recommends approval of Resolution 23-05. I will now take any questions.
Any questions from members of the board? So just my quick one. I gather this parallels 23-05 then? So-
Oh, this is 20, sorry.
Yeah, but this is non-bond, it sort of parallels the prior.
The other one, yes. Yeah,
Thank you.
exactly. Except for, I think what I really want to call to attention is that we don't really issue bonds for single family. So all of our production is TBA, therefore it's single family non-bond. And on the multifamily side, it's kind of the reverse, whereas we issue bonds for our multifamily production, generally speaking. So, it's kind of one active resolution and kind of one a little less active. And again, it's reversed between the two production units.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Melissa, if you could see if there's any members of the public who have questions or comments on this topic.
Please raise your hand at this time if you'd like to make a comment. I'm not seeing any hand raised at this time.
Thank you very much. I'll entertain a motion to approve Resolution 23-05.
I'll move to approve resolution number 2305.
Thank you. Member Avila Farias. Is there a second?
Second.
Member White. Melissa, could you please call the roll for this motion, please?
Ms. Avila Farias?
Yes.
Ms. Cabildo?
Yes.
Chair Cervantes?
Yes.
Mr. Fiegels?
Yes.
Mr. Fernandez?
Yes.
Ms. Grant?
Yes.
Mr. Prince?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. White?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Resolution 23-05 is approved.
Thank you very much. And on to agenda item 12, which is Resolution 23-06.
We're almost there. This is actually a pretty straightforward one, I hope. It's our SIDLAC resolution allowing staff at the agency to apply for up to $2 billion of volume cap from SIDLAC for its multifamily programs only. Staff recommends approval of Resolution 23-06.
Are there any questions or comments on this particular resolution?
What's the percentage of the SIDLAC allocation that's being requested?
So it is actually our $2 billion ask is actually significantly above what is expected from the agency, and is there to provide cushion for our, cushion for our anticipated use of the SIDLAC pool. I think we can look at, there's our multifamily. I guess we will provide that to you at the next meeting or via email, whatever the board has. 443 million? Yeah, 443 million for MIP allocation. But we also do our conduit stuff too, yeah. Plus conduit, so. We do run our conduit-only business through the SIDLAC as well.
Member Prince, it's a good question. We'll get back to you at the next meeting. Because I'm not
Feels
sure.
like a big ask. Yeah, so
It is, especially if you take a look at, I think probably back at the business planning cycle, we also include, I believe, our conduit-only issuances, as we were the primary issuer of that piece. So it's not just the MIP loans we are funding, but the conduit-only pieces that are going through our conduit business as well. So that number actually is larger than, again, the $400 million from our MIP perm loans.
Yeah, I guess I apologize, I didn't hear the question, but we did $1.3 billion in conduit through SIDLAC this year. So if we're going to continue on the pace of growth, then the ask and the reso, I think, would still be appropriate. It doesn't mean we're getting it. It just means we're authorized to go up to that much, should people want to utilize us as the conduit.
Yeah, so again, it's the $1.3 billion plus our regular production as well, so.
Did you want Executive Director Johnson Hall? comment?
I am going to leave it there.
Do you have a, Member Prince, a follow-up question? You're looking like you might.
I just don't understand the kind of impact that ask has on the overall program. Director Johnson Hall has met with me when I raised questions about the income targeting that was happening through CalHFA versus through CIDLAC, where the numbers are, the targeting is deeper through CIDLAC. The partnerships with local communities seems to be a little bit stronger through that program. And so it feels to me that this is, I don't know, it feels from a local Santa Clara perspective that it's going around some of the goals and vision that community has. So I have a really hard time being able to support this without really understanding the impact on our Santa Clara projects. And so so my look is like I just don't know enough information to feel confident to be able to vote yes. So, but yeah, and I understand 1.3 million to 2 billion. It's really 1.3 plus the 500 million for the MIP program, so it's 1.8 to 2 billion, so it's not that much of an increase.
They would be inclusive.
Yeah, that's, the 2 billion is inclusive of the 1.3 plus
Of the one,
500.
no, just the 1.3.
So you're going from 1.3 billion to 2 billion.
I think that's the ask in the reso, but again, I go back to, it doesn't mean we get 2 billion.
Yeah,
It
and I
means we
just-
have a reso that allows us to go up to that without coming back to the board.
Two.
Otherwise, we would get requests for conduit, doing conduit issuance, and we would have to return to the board and ask you to augment the resolution in order to do the transactions.
Yeah, it's an authorization for our application, right?
And CIDLAC can still say no.
Correct.
Absolutely.
And it would still go through the same
Yeah.
project
It's not- yeah.
waterfall approval process.
Yeah, it's not, no slam dunk here.
Other questions or comments from members of the board? I don't see any. Melissa, could you please reach out, see if there's any members of the public that have a question or comment on this item?
If you're interested in making a comment, please raise your hand at this time. No hands are raised at this time.
Okay, I'll bring it back to the board, looking for a motion to approve Resolution 23-06. Is there a motion? Member White, motion to approve. Is there a second? There's a second from Member Avila Farias. Melissa, can you please call the roll?
Ms. Avila Farias?
Yes.
Ms. Cabildo?
So, I guess I'm curious, I am concerned with the things that, Member Prince, is it best for me just to like abstain?
Chair Cervantes?
Yes.
Mr. Fiegels?
Yes.
Mr. Fernandez?
Yes.
Ms. Grant?
Yes.
Mr. Prince?
I don't want to say. I'm going to be a no, sorry.
Let's see, Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. White?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
The resolution 23-06 is approved.
Thank you all very much. That gets us through the resolutions. Agenda item 13 are a variety of informational reports which are in the back of the packet. And I guess I'll look to see if there are any questions that board members have on any of these items where we can pull in staff to sort of respond or follow up. Are there any questions on items in the packet A through F that are under agenda item 13?
Just a comment, if I may.
Yes, Member Russell.
Yeah, I just want to comment as a board member of CalHRC. I just want to really commend President Rebecca Franklin. You're president, right? Just for the, again, nimble work in terms of this program being able to respond to changing conditions that we've found as we've rolled out this program. We found that there are ways to improve it, and that on the fly we've been able to make those improvements. And I just want to thank you for that,
Did you have anything you want to say?
Madam President.
Thank you for that. That's very gracious. Any other comments or questions, rather, from members of the board on the items included in the packet? I think I'll look to see if there's any questions from the public. Melissa, if you could please reach out. Again, we ask individuals to hold their comments or questions for 3 minutes, up to 3 minutes.
Please raise your hand now if you would like to make a comment. I'm seeing no hands raised at this time.
Okay, thank you all very much. So agenda item 14 is sort of other board matters, where we got, if there's any topic a board member has they'd like to discuss, is sort of a general, open the floor for items for the board to ask if they would like some follow-up, not necessarily at this meeting, but in the future. I'm looking, I see one hand raised member. Avila Farias.
Yes, Chair Cervantes, I was just wondering when we will be seeing the ADU update, have discussion on that more. I know we paused it and just kind of see where we're at, if that's coming in the future agenda. Doesn't have to be today. I mean, I'm just asking if it'll.
For the May meeting, basically.
Yeah,
a
if
future
it'll
meeting.
be brought up later. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other items that individuals would like to raise, maybe for a future meeting? I think I'll throw out 2 items, one of which is I've had some conversations with staff about the idea of, I guess we're calling them brown bag lunches. It's not really that, though, but much of what we do and the world we operate in is highly technical, and I'll confess, as someone who's newer on the board than others, it's been a learning curve. And it seemed that there might be aspects of what we do where it might lend itself, in the old days, it would have been sit down over lunch and talk it through with someone, because we have really great expertise here at the staff level on that. It's kind of hard to do that and make that work with Bagley Keene. So one idea might be to pre-record different items like ABCs of tax credits, just to throw something out, or any other aspects of the work we do, which is kind of technical, may not suit itself to a board meeting necessarily, unless we have time in a board meeting, but I thought I'd just put that out there, some discussion with staff, but I'd also open it up to members of the board to think it through. If there's a topic area or 2 or 3 that individuals have that they'd like to learn more about, it's like, I always kind of wondered, may not be the Overton window, but it could be something else. But I think I would get that, say, to Executive Director Johnson Hall, and we could see what we can work out. It's a bit of an experiment here, but I thought I'd put it out there as a way we can all together move up the learning curve. That was the first item. The second is, now that it feels like we're meeting live in person, it's great to see you all. And one thing I've wanted to do is to try to connect directly with board members, just sort of learn more about your perspective on the work of CalHFA. I'd love to get your perspective on the world of affordable housing, and because each of us touches that differently. Was very fortunate to have coffee just a couple of weeks ago with member Avila Farias. That was really helpful for me. So I'm going to reach out to different folks to see if I can come down to LA or San Diego or other wonderful places in the state and maybe spend some time just so we can get to know each other a bit better. I would find that tremendously helpful. So I just want to put that out there as well, and I'll follow up on that.
We can do lunch, not just coffee.
Ooh, okay, just up the ante on this one. We'll take you up on that. All within the state's reimbursement, I think we'll just pay for it ourselves, I suspect, anyway. So that was the other topic I had. Member Williams?
I just want to highlight that on March the 24th, we will have a grand opening for a real catalytic and monumental project in Fresno called the Monarch at Chinatown. It is a partnership of a wide number of funding partners and is really catalytic. I've invited many of the funders, but I'd like to also extend that invitation to you all as well. We are doing work that really is inclusive and has multiple partners. And so I invite you to that. I'd also like to just say thank you to you all, because prior to my coming to the board, you funded a project in Fresno called Allegra Commons, which serves formerly unhoused families, as well as some of our families who were in public housing. We had the grand opening for that about a week and a half ago. So you're always welcome to Fresno, whether we're having a grand opening or not. you will have a grand experience in the Central Valley in Fresno. So thank you to that.
Thank you. I look forward to that, too. So our penultimate item on the agenda is 15, which is public comment, and this is just for general comments of the public. Again, we ask individuals to keep their comments to 3 minutes or less. And Melissa, if you could open the Zoom to see if there's anyone who has raised their hand.
So this is open to topics that may not have been, that actually were not already addressed in the agenda. Are there any members of the public that have a comment at this time? Please raise your hand. I'm seeing no hands raised at this time.
Thank you very much. Last item is adjournment, so unless there's any objections, I will adjourn the meeting, and I'll note that it's 3:11. My schedule had us at 3:21 for this. We're ahead of schedule by 10 minutes, so congratulations, everyone. Meeting adjourned.